Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 6 of season 2 of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Today's guest is Ben Buckwold, and Ben is the founder and CEO of ESL Library. ESL Library was founded in 2002 as a resource site for English teachers. Their materials are used in thousands of classrooms in more than 100 countries across the world. Ben started out as a solopreneur and now has a thriving company of 30 plus employees. I had a great time chatting to Ben about his life, his work, and his time in Japan. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey everyone, buckle up for a new episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, the one and only podcast made to help you launch your business or take your existing business to a level of success you could never have imagined. Whether you're a school owner, freelancer, publisher, or other entrepreneur, you're sure to pick up lots of actionable advice when you listen to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Remember to visit eflmagazine.com for great articles and features. Without further ado, here's your host, the founder of EFL Magazine, Philip Pound.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Ben Buckwold, which I hope I got that right. We did a little bit of practice. And Ben is CEO of ESL Library.
That's right.
That's correct. And Ben, how are you today? Where are you based? And tell me what's been going on in your life lately.
I'm very well today. I'm based in Winnipeg, Canada. Our company is primarily from Canada, but we're spread out all over the world now. We've got 40 staff, and we're in 5 or 6 different countries of operation. But I'm based in Winnipeg, Canada, which, by the way, is today a very hot day here. Unusually hot, but it's typically a cold place.
What is that in Celsius? So
it's 30 degrees Celsius today.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and so that's very unusual for late September in Winnipeg. In the winter, it can get as cold as minus 30, minus 40. Wow. Even in the summer, it gets as hot as plus 30 or plus 40. It's like extremes, but it's typically really not that hot in September like it is today.
It's amazing. I didn't know you were in Canada or you're from Canada, but when somebody says Canada, I'm from Canada, you can hear the Canadian accent. It's just it picks up from there. So Ben, I wanted to talk to you. You had a recent conference. How did that go?
That went really well. It was our first time to host a conference, and we really weren't sure how it would go. And we ended up having nearly 1,400 people register for the conference. At any given time, there was 400 people in a session. And we were surprised at how well it went because, it was our first time hosting a conference, and we anticipated, hiccups and logistical issues. But logistically, it went really, really well. And the vibe and the connections that we made with teachers, everything just was really special, and we had a really great day. And it was 2 days, and we're going to certainly make this an annual thing now.
Great. And what did you learn from it? What was some key takeaways that you think you can maybe learn from and maybe improve for next year?
What we learned was just that it's important to be deeply connected with. I mean, we knew this already, but now through a conference, there's a better opportunity to really connect and engage with your audience, and use that opportunity to really get to know your customers even better than you might already. And have an open sort of platform and forum where people can talk and communicate all together. Logistically, we're still digesting what we may or may not have learned, and I think that maybe for podcast number 2. But things went so smoothly that we're trying to determine what actually we could have done better at this point. But it was something that went off quite well.
Fantastic. And tell me about your customers.
So ESL Library is it's a subscription-based content and courseware platform for English teachers. And so teachers either independently on their own will subscribe to the service. They'll sign up as an individual teacher, or schools, school districts, universities, colleges. They may also purchase in bulk for all of their faculty or staff that are teaching English. We produce content and courseware that is for a wide range of language teachers or English language teachers, anywhere from teachers who are teaching young children all the way up to adult. So it's quite a broad range of customers.
Okay, and it's presumably printable and to be able to be used online. Was it mostly printable before, or had you kind of pivoted to online and using with tablets? How did that?
Yeah, so we started. I started the business in 2002. I launched ESL Library. So we've been around for nearly 20 years now. We're going into our 20th year next year in 2022, and so we're looking forward to celebrating that 20th year. But obviously, when we started back in 2002, print PDFs were basically what everybody was expecting. And that actually remained pretty consistent for many years. The PDF was primarily what teachers were accessing the site for. In 2017, we began developing interactive versions of our content to assign as homework or to broadcast interactively in your classroom, to avoid the PDF or to use in conjunction with the PDF. So maybe with the PDF, you might be doing that in class, but you might be assigning something at home to do on your device. So it was a mix, a hybrid of that. Some teachers are only using the digital, some are only using print, and some are using a combination. But obviously, when COVID hit, a huge number of teachers shifted over to the digital tools that were there. Pre-COVID, so from the time we launched those digital tools, which was really sort of the beginning of 2018 until the beginning of 2020 or the February of 2020, we had about 170,000 homework tasks completed in that time. And since COVID, in the last 19 months, we've had more than 22 million homework tasks completed on the platform. So you can see that obviously there's been a massive switch and shift towards digital.
And you were well positioned. I mean, maybe you put it for a technology point of view, but there was an environmental consideration as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody in this industry knew that sooner or later there would be this shift. We obviously weren't assuming that it would happen so quickly, but I think anybody who's in this industry who is still in print probably either has a digital product or is working towards a digital product. So we were lucky that we started early enough back in 2017. We actually started with digital apps in 2008 and had a number of consumer apps. But at some point, we shifted our focus back to strictly teacher-based content, web-based.
I didn't know before that you've been in business since 2002. So let's just go back a little bit. Obviously, did you have a teaching career, ESL career before that, or?
Yeah. So I studied journalism at university, and I wanted to be a writer, but I ended up going over to Europe for a year to travel after school. And while I was there, I ended up doing my TEFL certificate through International House for the CELTA, and really loved it, and decided I wanted to go teach for a year before getting back into my own field. And I ended up going over to Japan in 1997. And I expected to only stay there for a year and then come back home. But as you know, I don't know how long how long have you been in Tokyo?
9 years.
9 years. Okay. So as
I
you
left
know,
I didn't have the usual route. I had a proper office job, and it kind of my story is a bit long, so I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, 9 years.
Okay, but as you know, Tokyo is an incredibly fascinating place, and it's hard to just leave after a year. It's very hard to go there for a year and just go home. There's so much more you want to see over time. So I ended up there for 5 years. And so that would have been from 97 until 2002. And then in my last year, like somewhere mid 2001, I quit my teaching job and began working on what is now ESL Library. So the idea there was to build a subscription-based content platform where you pay a monthly fee or an annual fee, and then you get unlimited access to materials that can complement or supplement your own curriculum, or what is now, because the library's grown so much, now it acts also as your main curriculum. You don't need to use it alongside a textbook. But at the time, the idea when we first launched was that it would be something to complement or supplement your own materials. A lot of teachers, were you a teacher?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So as you know, a lot of teachers spend a lot of time in the evenings producing their own content, their own materials. They're expected to do that. They're often not paid for it for that time. And so the idea behind ESL Library was that we would build such a massive library of materials that you'd be able to find stuff that is completely relevant to the needs of your students. Okay.
And tell me about your time in Japan. I mean, this is something I like talking about. Of course, it's like you. I love living in Tokyo. The summers, not so much, but as you know, the humidity and the heat. But and I will explain, like as I did with Dave Sperling's podcast about the places in Tokyo, so for people who are unfamiliar. So yeah, tell me about your time in Japan and teaching and.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned just before we went on, started recording the podcast, that you had just done an interview with Dave Sperling, and he was one of the first players in this field of any kind, really, just to get the web going with respect to English language teaching. And I think we used to advertise on his site back in 2002.
Oh, really? He was going since like 93, was it 93, 94? If I can remember my memory. Yeah. Well, yeah. For those that are listening, refer back to the podcast. Yeah. So, sorry, Ben. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, no, I was just saying that it's interesting that you just interviewed him. But my time in Tokyo, I lived, I didn't know much about the teaching world there when I went to go teach there. And so I looked in the newspaper for jobs and before flying over there, and I found one which was with Nova. And so they sponsored me to go over there, but I only ended up being with them for 2 months. I didn't like the system that they had, this sort of more fast food type teaching. And I was looking for a little bit of more serious teaching job. So I remained with them for 2 months, and then I just quit and started looking for another job. I was just outside of Tokyo. I wasn't in Tokyo. I was in Kanagawa, but I spent most weekends in Tokyo going downtown. Yeah.
Okay. So for those that don't know, Nova, they would have positioned themselves maybe at the more kind of eikaiwa, what was it, 40-minute lessons, maybe be very price competitive. And they went bankrupt, didn't they, suddenly? And they left a lot of teachers high and dry. I can't remember when they went bankrupt. Was it mid-2000s?
Yeah, it was a few years after I left Japan. I think, mid-2005 or 06 or something like that. Yeah.
So yeah,
but I did hear that they came back at some point.
Yeah, they are back. I do see them. I don't know what the relationship was with the previous company. So you did your teaching. What kind of students did you have? Business?
Well, so then I ended up at a number of sort of like smaller eikaiwas for a little bit while I was trying to find some work. Then I ended up at ALC, ALC ALC. The publishing company, which had a wing of their publishing company doing English lessons, like business English. And so they would send us out to different campuses of big companies in Japan, like Hitachi and Mitsubishi and Sony and all these different places. So you would go out and you teach business English, which was something that I really enjoyed, except for the travel. These campuses were like so far spread out across Tokyo and Kanagawa. So you were like constantly on trains getting to these locations. But it was a lot of fun. So I did that. And then I ended up just doing that in the evenings, and then found a really great job at a high school in Chigasaki, just on the beach in Kanagawa, and ended up there for several years, or 3 years at that high school.
So Hitachi in Kanagawa, Higashi Kanagawa, did you work there?
Yeah, I did. Did you?
Me too. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I worked for Hitachi Business Services for about a year, 2 years, and so they got the new grad engine. They were systems engineers, and it was kind of part of the orientation. You had to do presentation skills. Yeah,
so
they're
were
a nice
you?
bunch.
Yeah, they were very nice. Was it through a company that you were working for them, or were you working directly for Hitachi?
Actually, twice. Actually, I went through Interact first.
Okay,
yeah, everybody knows Interact. Interact have kind of they're mostly on ALT, Assistant Language Teacher Market. I think they've completely, for the last maybe 5 years, they're out of the dispatch market, the business dispatch market. And then I worked for the actual Hitachi Business Services, which is a unit within Hitachi, but it's not Hitachi, and they provide service training to the employees. And there's one in Omiya, and there's one in somewhere on the Yamanote line. But the Higashi Kanagawa building is kind of iconic, isn't it? Because it has this huge atrium, and it's used in a lot of commercials in Japan.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that, but yeah.
And dramas as well, because sometimes you would TV and say, "Oh, that's the Hitachi building in Higashi Kanagawa." So we'll maybe put a link somewhere in the description. So yeah, you did that work. I know exactly with the students, and they're all divided up by TOEIC scores, aren't they? So it's like
I think so. I can't remember how they were divided.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah. That's enjoyable gig. So 5 years, and 5 years goes by very quickly, doesn't it?
It went by very, very quickly. Yeah. It was like in a flash.
And what took you back? Was it, did you have to be dragged away, or was the change in life, or you just felt you needed to settle down and do something different? What took you back?
Well, I was getting a little tired in Japan, and I didn't really want to leave, but I was getting a little tired, and I sort of did want to get back home, at least for a year or so, back to Canada. But at that point, I still wasn't sure if I was going to go back. But what I did know is that I wanted to start this business. I really enjoyed, because of my background in writing in university, I really did enjoy the lesson plan creation. I enjoyed in the evenings writing lesson plans, planning the class minute by minute, and preparing them. And after several years, I had a decent handful of pretty good quality content, and I wanted to try to package that in some way and sell it to schools. And actually, what we were going to do at first was to just put them onto CD-ROM, and so you'd get these like ready-made lessons.
Wow, and, CD-ROM, that's taking me back. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly. That's how far back this idea was starting. But then it became evident I was seeing more and more newspapers start to sort of create subscription-based services, and it made sense to start a subscription-based content service. It was a hard sell in those days, because you had to, number one, you had to convince somebody to pull out a credit card, which not many people would do back in 2002. Then you would also have to convince them to allow your card to be stored encrypted for future billing, which was kind of unheard of back then. And then as well, you had to convince a teacher who typically had lower budgets to do that. And so for several years in the beginning, it was a very sort of slow, gradual incline of customers and sales.
That's exactly, actually, Dave mentioned this morning about when he first started, when he first monetized the ads on Dave's ESL Cafe, he had to do the payment processing. He had to apply for the payment processing. There was no Stripe or PayPal back then.
Right.
And it was a very laborious, complicated, nerve-wracking experience just to get it and get everything right. So yeah. And then you're saying the same thing. Of course, there wasn't the same level of trust in buying things online. There was a lot of scare stories. Amazon, a lot of Yes, wasn't that?
Yeah. So what ended up happening for us is that we gained enough customers over time that the company could sustain itself. It made small profits every year. Every year, I reinvested those profits into better content. Just put all the money right back into hiring better writers and to create better illustration. And over time, the library just got ESL Library got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So gradually each year, the product was improving. And then around 2015, we really started to see a spike in user adoption. And that was due to a few things. Number one, by the time 2015 came around, everybody, by that time, most people had a Netflix account or a Spotify, or they were paying for content in some form online and in their personal lives. And they were used to paying in that regard. So that was no longer a foreign thing by that time. And then schools started to adopt budgets for digital content around that time. The product itself had gotten so good by that time. And lastly, we started putting almost all of our profit after that to flying out to schools all across North America and just meeting with teachers and administrators constantly. Like every month we were on a plane going out to see a teacher or an administrator and showing them what we're working on, asking if we're going the right direction or not. And so it was very user driven or teacher-driven a platform that was being created. And so we were getting it right a lot of the time. And then we started to see this real uptick in number of teachers subscribing.
Okay, this is very interesting what you're saying, but I just want to go back a little bit. We'll return to this in a few moments. Yeah. But at the beginning, so how did you start? Where did you get financing? Like how many people had you? Was it just from your home and it was self-financed, bootstrapped, or how did that happen at the beginning?
Yeah, well, so I was in Japan for nearly 5 years, and 4 of those years I was working and earning a living there. And because I had those 2 jobs, I was working at a high school, which, by the way, the high schools, if you got into a decent high school and you were directly in the high school as opposed to maybe like the JET program or something, they paid really nice bonuses and paid really good salaries. So I was doing okay there, and then had a second job in the evening. So I was really saving quite a lot of money. And by the end of those 4 years, I had saved about $80,000. And I put that away, and that was what I used for that next year to live on and to start ESL Library. I had to pay a web development company about $40,000. I had to develop some illustrations, which cost not that much, maybe $5,000 or $6,000. And then there were some other expenses. And between that and living there, I was able to get the product off the ground and start selling. So we didn't need to take any investment. It was just myself. I only needed to pay myself in that first year. And it sustained itself and did good enough that by the next year I could start, hiring another person, and the next year hiring another person. But we never took any investment or any loans. We had no loans, no debt, and no investment. In 2018, we took a small investment in the company for about 10% of our company in order to raise some money 2017, in order to raise money to start working on our digital initiatives, to be able to more quickly hire technology experts, so developers and engineers who could develop our product digitally. Mostly this has been entirely bootstrapped as a company.
Well, I'm so impressed you were able to save $80,000 in Tokyo. So you'll have to give me some tips on that. But I think a lot of the high school market has gone to agency now. So it's not what it was, and the agencies are taking the cut. So well done there. So it took off. What kind of difficulties did you find at the beginning? So you mentioned about payment processing. Was there, to educate the customer to use online? Was that also a problem where people?
No, that was not so bad. We right from the beginning, we've put a real emphasis on clean, simple design. And if you go to ESL Library, you'll see that it's very easy to navigate. And it was like that even back in 2002, when back then there was a lot of very messy websites, as I'm sure you can recall. They were just like splattered with stuff all over the place. And this was a very, very clean site, easy to navigate, easy to understand, and very well indexed. So that wasn't really an issue in those days.
Okay, good to know. I worked for a telecoms company around then, and I think this was time of broadband, wasn't it? 2000, 2001, and the internet was only reaching its full potential around then. We had the dial-up and ISDN.
Well, that was maybe an issue back then for us, is that the PDF sizes, it was hard to compress them and get them down to something that was easy to download, and the download speeds were really slow. So to get that PDF open did take time, and I think that was a bit of a pain point for some teachers back then.
Okay, so the company took off. You bootstrapped. You started taking on more people gradually. How did the expansion go? How did you scale? How long did it take?
Well, so we were never that interested in really scaling, and so we kind of ended up being kind of a boutique, independent online publishing company for many years. We sat at about 5 or 6 staff until right up until about 2017. So like for 13 years or 14 years. Actually, for 16 years, we were a very small company, and we were just satisfied in trying to make better content. That's all we were focused on, really, just to keep creating better content. In 2017, when we decided to move towards digital, that's when we knew we had to really increase the size of our team. And in order to support digital development, unless we wanted to keep raising money, which we really didn't want to do, we needed to make a product that people really loved and would keep coming back to digitally, I'm saying. And so we had to grow our team and to do that right. And so we ended up, as I told you, we took a small investment to get a handful of engineers. I think we had about 5 or 6 to start. And we found that we would gradually build a little bit better. And as more customers came on, we would grow our team. So the way that we've been sort of growing and scaling is that every time the company gets a little bit stronger, we reinvest that money into more staff to keep perpetually making a better product. Okay.
And initially you were writing a lot of the materials, and this is your kind of passion, really, is and maybe for some teachers it isn't. So you solve that pain for them. But then your role had to, evolve, didn't it? You became a manager and then CEO. So how was that? Do you still do design, or how have you felt your role developing?
Yeah, so I'm not involved anymore in the publishing side of things. We've got a really amazing publishing team right now, led by Tara Benwell, and she was the first contract writer for our company, and I think she came on in 2004 or 2005. She thought we were a much bigger company than we were when she was applying for a job with us. She thought we were, a company like Pearson or Macmillan or something like that, because we did have a very nice looking website, but it was just me. And she was surprised later on to find out she was applying for a company that only had one person working there. But now she leads that publishing team, and she decides what content is going to go on the site and what they're going to work on. I'm not involved there anymore. And what I have found, in the last few years, is that my involvement has shifted a lot more towards the vision of the company, where we take it next, and how we build those teams to be able to do that.
Okay, so that's taking the vision of the company forward. So we'll come back to that in a little bit, but tell me more about you, what you like to do when you're not in the office. What's your passion?
Well, I have a family, so I've got a 7-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl, and and so that pretty much occupies my whole life outside of work. And I work fairly hard during the day, and then in the evenings it's mostly hanging out with the kids. Pre-COVID, my wife and I and the kids really loved traveling quite a bit. We would travel several times a year, and obviously that's not happening these days. But we're looking forward to that happening again one day soon.
So, having a family, and maybe you started the company before you had your family. Do you think it's possible for people to have a family and start a company at the same time? Because I had this chat with Dave. Sorry, Dave, we won't mention you all the time. It's just fresh in my memory this morning, and he said that when he first started his site, that it took him away from his family, and he regretted that a little bit. So
yeah, it's same with me. I mean, I didn't have a family when I started the site, but I did get married, I think 3 years later. And certainly even until recently, I think work has affected family life in some way. And that happens a lot when you're running a company. So anybody who owns a company or is running a company and has that big responsibility of ensuring that the lights are always kept on, sort of can't just put it to bed at the end of the day, or can't just walk out of the office at the end and not think about it. So like the first, I don't know, maybe even the first like 12 years of running the business, I worked probably at least 12 hours a day, usually 6 days a week. And was very tired, and it wasn't good for anything. I think that if you can do that, if you are, if you don't have a family, that's the time to do it. But if you do have a family or are in a relationship or something, and even just for your own personal well-being, it is really important to not give everything to your business. It's important that you take care of yourself and your family and have a life outside of business. So now I work about 9 hours a day. I get up, I start maybe about 5 a.m. So I can try to get some hours out of the way before it's family time. And I try to end my days around the time the kids get home.
Okay. And what kind of a person wants to start a business? I mean, when we look back and we do things, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they start businesses and they've gone through some harrowing times and say, well, was it worth it? So has it been worth it for you? Could you see yourself doing anything else, working corporate job, working like the 9 to 5, or has this always been you?
No, I don't think I could work in a corporate job anywhere. I think I could work as a teacher. I would have loved to have continued on teaching. I really enjoyed teaching, and I think I could have worked in journalism in some way. That was something I really wanted to get into. But I definitely don't think I could work, for another company in some sort of corporate position in any way. I don't have that passion for business. The reason I have a passion for what we're doing is because I have a passion for teaching. And so when you have a passion for something, then it makes it that much easier to run the business. I think if you're just going in for money, that can make it really, really hard, and often you'll lack a lot of happiness if you're, just going into business to make a profit. There's got to be something there that really excites you about it. And I don't know if I think there are two types of people that go into business. One that is going in simply for the money, but there's a lot of people who go into it because they want to make something better and they get excited about creating stuff. And I think I fall more on that other side.
And I think most of the guests here on the podcast also, I've never heard I don't think I've interviewed one who said that, it's just about the money and the
Right.
figures. There's always some passion behind it in some way, change or just make their lives better or, do things on their own terms. So yeah, it's kind of consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. You want to do something that is going to make something better, and you want to do something that you're going to enjoy doing. So, I really enjoy what we're building here at this company. It's fun what we're making. I like seeing the result of it after we make it. So you have to enjoy making it, and you have to look forward to seeing somebody use it and benefit from it.
So building a company from 2002, now 2022, and saving up 80 grand in Tokyo, I think you have a little bit of the Japanese mindset. You're more kind of lineage, more long-term. Would you say you're less of a risk taker and more measured in your approach?
Yeah, I think we're definitely at the company. We don't take that many risks, as you can see. We're 20 years in, and we're not, a unicorn billion-dollar company, but we're still in business, and we can employ people, and we can make a great product. I think one of the problems that's happening today is that there's this, the way that people get into business often is by raising money, and then they get sort of stuck in this situation of having to they're working for the shareholders more than anything, and that's fine, but you're often sort of stuck in this, and they're expecting sort of hyper growth, and you hear about these companies that are going for hyper growth, and some of them get there, but several of them that are aiming for that just sort of fall off and die. And it's really hard to have hyper growth like that. And the ones that you hear about are just the ones you hear about. You don't hear about all the ones who didn't make it. And so we've always taken a different approach. And we haven't aimed for hyper growth. We've just aimed for perpetual improvement of the product. And I think if you do that, if you just keep trying to make your product a little better and a little better every day, and keep learning from what was wrong the day before, and don't worry too much about what was wrong, but rather learn from it and keep improving it, it's far less likely for your business to fail. But it's more likely for your business to fail if you just simply try to reach for the stars right from the beginning.
Okay, good advice, I think, for our listeners. And I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about when people took plane flights across North America. Not so many now. I don't know, is Canada and US border still closed, or?
No, it kind of just recently opened up again, because of the vaccines. It's making it a little bit easier to now show your vaccine passport and get across. So you can get across now. My wife actually just is actually in San Francisco right now for a conference, the SaaStr conference, which, by the way, your listeners might want to look into. SaaStr is, SaaS stands for software as a subscription, and the SaaStr conference, which is SaaStr, is the conference is going on right now, but that's a place where you can learn all about, starting a subscription-based business. So anyway, she has just gone down there. It's her first trip to cross the border since before COVID. And it is getting easier, a little bit easier now. But although we still don't feel that comfortable about flying, but it's easier.
It's easier. For sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you took these trips, and it was very much a consultative process, you wanted to find out, get buy-in to what you're making, get some feedback. So you were very methodical about how you did things. There wasn't what we would say hard sell. It was very much bringing the customer on very early as part of the process.
Yeah. So, we don't even have a sales team at this company. We don't have a single salesperson at ESL Library, and we never have. Almost all of our sales is inbound traffic. So the way that it typically works, it seems to anyways, is that a teacher ends up stumbling upon our site, ends up buying a subscription, ends up using it and enjoying it, and then pushes that to administrators to buy for the whole school or the whole department. So we don't even really understand sales very well. We don't have experts at the company in sales. And instead, the way that we've achieved sales is by having this direct line of communication with the teachers that are using the platform or the administrators that are buying. And so we used to do it, or we still do it, but through primarily email and phone calls and things like that. And then at one point, as our budgets got a little bit bigger, we decided to go and start meeting with teachers and administrators in person. So we would put our money towards that. We would fly out and we would sit down and show the administrator or the teacher, hey, this is what we're working on. Does it sort of fit within the needs of your students and your teachers? And sometimes it would, and that would be great. And other times it wouldn't, but they would suggest what would be better. Then we would go back and we would write content that was more aligned to the needs of those schools. And that's how we just perpetually got better. And by the way, that really also allowed teachers to, or caused teachers and administrators to have a sense of trust in us that we were working together as opposed to just trying to push something on them.
Okay, good point. And what did you learn that you didn't know before? What were some teacher pain points? I'm not sure I'm the expert on the answer to that, because I always would go with Tara, our head of publishing, but sometimes it was about standards and alignment to standards, because there are different standards in different regions. In Canada, there's sort of a Canadian standard, the Canadian language benchmark standard. In the US, there's several different standards, all spread out in different states. So we would often learn about alignment and standards and what was sort of mandated that had to be taught at different levels. And we could focus or adapt based on understanding of those levels and those alignments. Okay, so tell me about competitors. So you mentioned before there's a lot of free sites, as we all know, and we know the names. As anybody who's listened to this podcast has been an English language teacher, or we've used a lot of these sites. There's a lot of free stuff out there, and there's paid as well. Competitors. So how do you see the market? How do you differentiate yourself? Because there's a lot of good providers out there.
There are. And I think some of the free stuff is getting better. But typically in the past, I never looked at the free sites as competitors, because it was really a different. It was a different product. It was we were trying to produce high quality. And I think often a teacher would be willing to pay, or a school would be willing to pay for the additional quality and spend less time sort of editing the content or fixing it up. And so I'm not as, when I'm thinking about competition, I'm not thinking as much about those free sites. But in the past, we were a product that would complement the big textbook companies. So often when you're teaching in a language setting, a textbook is fine for sort of a guided path, but you have to sort of go from one, you have to vary and pivot quite a bit. And it's necessary to have additional content. So we always sort of fit in there on the sidelines, and we didn't see those companies as competitors. We just saw it as a complement. But more recently, those companies obviously are moving away from the textbook and moving more into digital, whether it be in PDF form or courseware form. And certainly there's now this new type of competition where they're not going to be free either. They're going to be subscription based, and suddenly there's this competition with the big players. So we're seeing that happen on one side, and then on the other side, there are the self-study apps that everyone's aware of. Those self-study apps are working their way into schools as well. And so there's competition coming from that side. And then there's online tutoring companies as well, and they are moving more into content as well. And as they get better at content, they may find themselves moving more into selling content directly to schools too. So it's sort of coming at us from all angles now. Are
you going in the other direction? So you're saying tutoring companies, are you going into home tutoring, or is there, have you?
Well, what's interesting about ESL Library is that we have this massive base of teachers who use the product, and those teachers are almost all of them are professionally trained teachers. And then we've also got one of the best content libraries on the market for English language teaching. So we've got some of the things to go in that direction. But also, by the way, we have a number of teachers who use the platform as independent tutors. So they are using it already to tutor online. Whether we're going in that direction, that's yet to be seen. But
sure, I was a bit cheeky there, but
yeah, but there's certainly opportunity there. But one of the things that that I think we're getting a little bit better at now as a company is we used to try to just jump at anything and everything. There's so many opportunities for us. Like you said, tutoring is one of them, self-study is another. But if you just keep jumping from one to the other, it's hard to do them all really good. We want to make sure that if we do jump to one of those or enter one of those markets, that we can do it really well and not end up with a product that is mediocre.
Yeah, that's a problem a lot of people have, isn't it? Something's not working out, you go on to something else, grass is greener on the other side, and eventually you just become burned out because your attention is so diffuse, isn't it? So tell me, you mentioned about subscription. So what lessons did you learn from
subscription? Well, I mean, the great thing about subscription is that all you really have to do, and by the way, it's much easier to start a subscription company today than it was when we started it. There's so many tools that let you just get up and running overnight, software that lets you do that, whereas we sort of had to build all that stuff out. But the great thing about subscription is that really all you have to do is build a great product and take care of your customers and form strong relationships with them. And then they will just keep coming back. You spend far less time focusing on sales and trying to win back customers or selling something new to them. All you have to do is just keep making the product better and useful. And that's the beautiful thing about subscription-based businesses, is that as long as you're doing a good job and people like what you're doing, you can spend far less time worrying about sales and far more time worrying about just making something better.
And as you say, it's much easier now. You just have the credit card, and customer inertia comes in, doesn't it? And people, if they're happy with the service and they're happy to keep it going. But I did notice there's a few different things that you do. Is that you don't have the 3-box model that some subscription services have, and you also do it quarterly and yearly. Actually those just changed recently.
So we did used to have those. We didn't have 3 boxes, we had 2 boxes. And by the way, we've never had a free tier, so we've never gone with the freemium tier. We do offer some stuff for free on the site. So for example, if we might have a lesson plan on something that's has happened in the news, and maybe it's something tragic, and we've got a discussion starter lesson around that, often we'll just give that away for free, as opposed to trying to sell that. We don't want to be selling a particular or forcing somebody to buy something like that when it's important that it's being used in the class. So there are some free, there's a sort of a mini free component where you can get some free stuff. But we've always just had, originally it was just one plan, the PDFs. Then a couple of years ago when we introduced digital, we did have 2 plans. The standard plan and the plus plan. The standard was just PDFs. The plus was the PDFs and the digital. Just this fall, because we know that most teachers are moving towards digital anyways long term, we stopped offering just the standard, and now everybody gets the same plan. It's all just digital and PDFs all in one plan.
Okay, and people are happy about that?
They seem to be. I mean, we what we're trying to ensure is that at every stage of the learning journey or the teaching journey for our product, that teachers are assigning additional materials to be done at home. And the way that you need to do that is through the digital tools like on your students' devices. So it's got quite a high adoption and usage, and it seems to be quite popular. And then you asked about quarterly and annual. We used to have monthly. Actually, we used to have quarterly, and then we tried monthly for about a year, and we've gone back to quarterly. And this is really because teachers typically are not needing something monthly. They're going to use it if the product works, then they're going to use it long term. And so we want some sort of commitment, but we always offer full 100% refunds to every customer. And we say on our site that you get a refund after 2 weeks of usage, but we actually will refund anytime, even if it's several months later, and you just decide this isn't working out. So there's no pressure to the customer, but we do think that it's important that they are committing to a longer term than just simply monthly.
And how about summer for public schools? Do people unsubscribe and subscribe again in the autumn, or
typically not, because they have bought an annual subscription? So it's cheaper to buy the annual subscription anyway. So if they were to unsubscribe or to try to we don't offer pausing of the subscription. So you're buying it for the year. We're not pausing it, during Christmas holidays, for example, or spring break. It's just, it's ongoing. So it doesn't matter if you've got a month off or a week off here. It's just an annual renewal.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me about the new features. You mentioned mobile as well for students, and
So now every teacher can assign. So if a teacher still is using PDFs, and some do, many still do, or maybe they're just broadcasting the PDF and annotating it. Even if they're doing that, there's a digital component to almost every lesson now. So, maybe if you want to flip your classroom and ahead of a lesson, you may want to assign something to your students so that they're doing the reading before they come to class, and you're spending more time in the class just discussing the reading to start a debate or a discussion. You might want to click a button on that lesson, assign the reading and the pre-reading vocabulary to students so that they're well prepared and they're coming to class, and you're spending more time either going over the vocabulary in class or actually facilitating a conversation. So the homework tools and the digital tools have become a big part of it. What we're working now on is a lot more insights. So being able to present teachers with the right information at the right time so that they can make better decisions about what to teach next. So, being able to see that your students are struggling with this grammar structure, or they seem to be struggling in this language skill, and therefore you might want to teach this next. What we're trying to get really good at now is being able to recommend the right content at the right time.
Okay, so there's a flipped element to it.
Well, sometimes, it can be used for the flipped for a flipped classroom, but really what I'm trying to say is that we're just trying to get better at making recommendations to teachers and helping them make the informed decisions about what they should be teaching next, regardless of whether there's the flipped element or not.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so here's an impossible question, but I'll ask it anyway. About the future of ESL, what's going to happen post-COVID and with online and, with China, and what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs in ESL in the future?
Okay. China, I don't have a clue, and I don't really want to speculate. There's just too much going on there to really understand what will happen next in China. And by the way, we're not very focused on China as a company. We do have customers there, but it's a very hard market to get into, and you can spend all of your time trying to get in there, and it can be defeating in some ways. So unless you have a partner there, it's hard to break in. The future of ESL, it will be a far more digital classroom, whether you are teaching in person or you're teaching online. digital activities are going to become an important part of the class, and so is the planning tools that go along with it, and the insights. Just as I was mentioning before, being able to better track and understand the progress of your students, formative assessment, I do think that it's important that students get back into the classroom in language learning. This is like a really great opportunity for language students to practice their language in a more controlled and a more comfortable environment. And so I hope that classrooms don't go away, and I don't think that they will. They will come back, but there will obviously continue to be a lot of learning online as well. And I think, by the way, we hosted that conference I mentioned, and it went off really well. And one of the reasons it did was because the technology was really good. We were using a platform called AirMeet, and the conference went really well. I think that online classrooms are getting better and better too. It's still a little tiring for people to be in an online class all the time, but that's getting better. Okay,
and for you, for the company, for the future, what's you did touch a little bit on it, but is there anything, another conference coming out soon, or what's well
for our future? Just as I mentioned, we are working towards this more personalized approach to teaching, and we're trying to not there's a lot of companies a number of years ago in ed tech that were that set themselves up to replace the teacher, and now it's sort of coming full circle where instead technology companies are trying to empower the teacher, and we've always done that through content, and now we're trying to get better at that through digital presentation tools, insights, and organizational tools. So that's where we're headed with respect to our company. Conferences, we'll certainly host another conference next year for sure. We may make it biannual. And we're looking forward to possibly getting to TESOL. We've booked a booth at TESOL 2022. I don't know if you're familiar with that conference, one of the biggest.
Sure.
So last year and the year before were canceled. Actually, last year they did a virtual one, so we were there virtually. This year, I think it's in Pittsburgh. It's in a different American city every year. And we do have a pretty large booth set up there, or we've purchased a booth there, and we're hoping to get down there and actually meet people in person again in March, but that's still yet to be seen as to whether it will go through.
Great, Ben, it's been a fascinating talk, and some great insights and takeaways, and some real value for the listeners. So thank you very much for that. So if people want to get in touch with your company, partner with you, or work with you in some way, what's the best way to contact you or your team members?
Yeah, well, the website is esllibrary.com. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Ben Buckwold, Buckwold, and people are welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you contact us through the company, there's a contact page, obviously, on the site on esllibrary.com, and there's also a phone number there as well.
Okay, great. So Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you. And by the way, I enjoyed the conversation, and I do hope that one time, even off the podcast, we get a chance to talk. I'd love to hear more about your experience in Japan.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will definitely do that. Yeah. So, hold that thought. So thanks again. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast with Philip Pound. For more great advice and resources, check out eflmagazine.com. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.